Hello everyone, glad you can join me here again today. Today's going to be very interesting because I'm going to be offering a risky plan or a risky idea for how Andrew Yang can win the Democratic nomination process. And the reason why I'm making this video is because someone reached out on Twitter, and Twitter is the best way to get a hold of me. I'm not always on my YouTube comment section, although I do try to read as many of the comments as I can, but I'm on Twitter a lot more than I am my YouTube comment section. So someone reached out on Twitter and asked me, how can Andrew Yang win the Democratic nomination process? And I thought that that question was asked at just the right time, and I'll talk about why. But first, thank you all so much who have been watching the videos. Our last video just broke a new milestone. We got more than 4,000 views, so to all the thousands of viewers out there, thank you very much, and we'll be going in a just growing and growing. We'll be going to the moon. Who knows where we'll be going, but we'll be going in a positive direction, so that's always exciting for me to see. But anyway, the question that was asked, which is how can Andrew Yang win the Democratic nomination process, was asked at the perfect time, because we are entering into what I would call the second act of the nomination process. So if you view this whole nomination process as a story, like a movie or a book or a TV show, whatever your favorite form of entertainment is, we're entering into the second act of this play. And I'll talk about what that is. But before we get started, let's have a sip of some, what do we got today? Starbucks almond milk frappuccino. So we're being very hip today, and it's good stuff. That is not an endorsement of Howard Schultz, though I do have to say he makes a heck of a bottle of coffee. So I'm a fan. Good stuff. Anyway, so we're entering into the second act. So what is the first act? The first act was the introduction of all the main characters, as well as the establishment of the main conflict or the main problem. So since Joe Biden has entered the race, which is what I was waiting for, now that Joe Biden has entered the race, we have officially left the first act of our story. We have all of our main characters. We know who the characters are. We know what it is that they're trying to do, what their ideas are, what their thoughts, processes, motivations are. We have a good introduction to all of the players in the game. And we also know what the main conflict is. The main conflict is you want to win the presidency. You want to win the election. And the conflict that falls under that umbrella is you have to win first the Democratic nomination process. So we have our conflict and we have our main characters, which means now we're going to be entering into the second phase of the campaign, or the second act. And the second act, I would say, is the part where the hero of the story starts to win a bunch of minor battles. So they're going out, they look unstoppable for a time, they're winning everything that comes their way. Any problem that comes up, they seem to be able to solve rather easily. And so that's sort of where we're at, where we're going to be entering into for the next phase of the campaign. And so I wanted to start to think about, if Andrew Yang is going to be the Democratic nominee, like I have predicted in earlier videos, if he's actually going to win this process, he needs to start establishing himself as the hero in this story. And how can he do that? Well, he needs to start winning a bunch of minor battles. So I wanted to offer an idea that is going to be a bit risky. It's going to be a little bit risky, and a lot of you are probably not going to be too thrilled with this idea. But before you dismiss it out of hand, I want to explain what my thought process is and how I got here, and then you might still think it's a bad idea, and that's completely fine. But a bad idea is better than no idea, because you can fix a bad idea. So I'll let you be the judge, because again, this is a risky plan. But what Andrew Yang needs to do is get himself in a battle that he can win. And the plan is he needs to attack Bernie Sanders. That's the main idea. And before you go anywhere, just wait. I know what you might be thinking, and that is Andrew Yang is not the attack candidate. He's not the person who's going out running a negative campaign. He's not like Trump, and all the things that he said about other candidates so far have been positive things because he's a positive guy and this is a positive campaign. And I understand all of that completely. And I am not saying, again, not, I am not saying this, do not attack Bernie Sanders based on his personal characteristics. So don't attack him personally, even though that would work. Let's make that clear. That would work. Also, got my Yang 2020 hat on, Yang Wave. It's a very good looking hat. Yeah, very cool. Going to be very cool for the summer. So I am not saying that you should attack Bernie Sanders based on his personal characteristics. So don't attack him personally. What I am suggesting is that he has a rare and unique opportunity to attack Bernie based on his policies and his ideas. And I'll talk about why that is. But that's the important thing, is to attack Bernie Sanders based on his ideas, because Bernie Sanders can really be seen as the first iteration of these new ideas, and Andrew Yang can be seen as the, not Bernie 2.0, but just the person who's come across with more innovative, more exciting ideas, and we'll talk about that. But first, why attack at all? So why should Andrew Yang attack anyone at all? Why can't he just keep doing what he's doing, keep running a positive campaign, and then win that way? And the reason is, to win a campaign, you have to do two things. The first thing is you have to raise your own popularity. So you have to make yourself pretty popular with the voters. And the second thing you have to do is lower the popularity of the person you're running against so that there's a large enough differential. So you have to be more popular than the person you're running against. And any campaign, political or otherwise, any campaign is inherently a popularity contest. It's just what it is. You want you as a candidate, yourself, to be more popular than someone else. You want your ideas to be more popular. You want people to respond to you better. So it's a popularity contest. And there's only two ways that you can really win a popularity contest, and that is by raising your own popularity and lowering the popularity of the person you're running against until it's low enough that there's a big enough differential that you feel confident on election day. So you're going to have to attack. And there's really two reasons. One's a practical reason, and the second reason is sort of a moral reason. One, the practical reason of why to attack is because it works. It does work. If you are able to explain why it is that your ideas are good and why someone else's ideas are bad, you create that popularity differential, and that works. So there's a practical reason. There's a reason why people do it. It's because it works. But I would also say that there's a more moral reason, and that is because if someone has bad ideas, you don't want the person with bad ideas to win. And really, if someone has bad ideas and you know why those ideas are bad, you have some sort of obligation to talk about why those ideas are bad, because you don't want people to be stuck with someone who has bad ideas. You want them to be fully informed about the pros and the cons of whatever it is, whatever idea it is that you're talking about. So you almost have somewhat of a moral obligation to talk about why an idea is bad in a public political arena. So you have two good reasons to do some form of attacking. And when I say attacking, I'm really talking about explaining why your ideas are better than someone else's. So not attacking based on personality or who they are as a person. I'm not saying call him crazy Bernie, but I'm saying attacking by explaining why their ideas are not very good and why yours are better. So that's really what I mean by attacking. And so why Bernie Sanders? And the reason to attack Bernie Sanders, I believe, is what you really want when you go on the attack, and what the hero sort of needs in this story is to establish their own kingdom. Think of it like Daenerys in Game of Thrones, if you have watched that. And if you haven't, then maybe skip ahead for a few minutes, because I'm going to spoil something that happened years ago. And if you've been watching the show, this won't spoil anything, don't worry. But Daenerys had to first establish her kingdom. And what she did was she took over the Dothraki army, right? So she had to first establish herself as a leader, and then establish her kingdom, establish her base of support, and then she was able to cross the big ocean and go and do whatever it is that she did. I won't spoil too much. So Andrew Yang needs to do the same thing. He needs to sort of establish his kingdom. And unless you're creating a kingdom from scratch, which he sort of has, he has his own base of support, he has his Twitter followers, but I don't think he's reached past 1 million Twitter followers, so he has less of a kingdom and more of a rogue army band that's disparate, it's spread out, it's not really centralized in any one area. There's no big broad base of support, there's no kingdom there. And so I would suggest that he can establish his kingdom by taking Bernie Sanders' kingdom. And by taking Bernie Sanders' kingdom, I'm meaning taking his supporters, offering a better iteration, offering a better set of ideas, and bringing them into the fold. And then you're going to have what is probably one of the most energetic and grassroots of all the candidate supporters, besides maybe Trump. As far as the Democratic side goes, Bernie has really the most enthusiastic supporters on his side. These are people who are more than willing to go to a campaign speech, to rally, to phone bank, to do all the things that candidates want their supporters to do. They're very energetic and they're very engaged. And so, and Bernie is rather vulnerable, I would say, because Bernie doesn't really throw too many punches. When he was running against Hillary Clinton, he didn't go very strongly after Hillary Clinton in any real sense, compared to Trump at least. And in a situation where in both circumstances it seemed as if the system was being rigged, at least you can make this argument that the system was being rigged against Bernie and it was being rigged against Trump, Bernie Sanders didn't really come out too strongly against it, at least not to the level that Trump did. When there was even a hint of impropriety or a hint of ill will or let's call it corruption within the party, or even the media, Trump would go out loudly and strongly to talk about what it is that's going on. He would talk about the corrupting influences. He would point out the lobbyists in the audiences. He would refuse to go to a debate like the Fox News debate because they weren't treating him fairly. And these were things that he was comfortable doing because he knew that if he was going to continue fighting against a corrupt system, he was going to lose that battle unless he was able to point out the corruption of the system itself, thus negating its influence. There's still a little bit of influence, but you're able to negate some of those negative effects when you're able to bring these situations into the light. So the darkness can be dispelled by the light, and the light is transparency, the light is attention, the light is bringing it into the public sphere of influence. So when everyone boos Trump at a debate, it's not because people don't like him, it's because those are all lobbyists. This was a very powerful frame that he used during the debate, and Bernie Sanders didn't really do that too much, even though he had every right to. And I'm thinking about when apparently one of his staffers hacked the Hillary Clinton campaign, whatever it is that happened there. And if memory serves me right, that was something that he actually apologized for. I don't think that that was necessarily the smartest move. I think instead the better move would have been to talk about how the Clinton campaign and the DNC was rigging the process against him via this process of superdelegates, which, you know, they've gotten away with now. The main point here being Bernie Sanders lets you get a few free punches in. He's a little squishy as a candidate, if you will allow that. So you can attack him and he won't really attack you too strongly back. And there are 3 ideas that you can attack Bernie on, the Andrew Yang specifically. I don't think this works for really any other candidate. This is sort of unique to Andrew Yang. These 3 ideas are winning ideas against Bernie, and they would, I think, pretty much crumble that kingdom and allow him to absorb all of the people in that kingdom and bring them all into the fold. And if you believe Andrew Yang is the best candidate in the race, then this would be something that you would say is a very good thing to happen. Why would you want the supporters to be supporting someone that has bad ideas? You want them to support the person with good ideas, right? So how could he attack Bernie Sanders based on ideas and policies? That's what we're concerned with. The first thing is UBI. So we know that Bernie Sanders is a candidate that has been offering the universal jobs guarantee. And if you're a Yang supporter, you know that there are a lot of problems with a universal jobs guarantee. For instance, one of them might be if you're a single mother who's just had a newborn baby, you're not necessarily looking for a job. A job's not really going to help you. And you don't want a situation where people have to work in order to just baseline survive, because then in that scenario, if you get stuck in a bad job or a job that has no upward mobility, or you get stuck with a horrible boss, You don't want to be stuck in that situation. You want to have the freedom to be able to move on, find more opportunity, do something that's going to work better for you, and something that's going to allow you to provide more value to the economy. That's what we want. And because what's the idea behind a jobs guarantee? The idea behind a jobs guarantee is that everyone will have a base amount of income to survive because they'll have a job. 100% they'll have a job. So they will have a base level of income in order to survive. But a federal jobs guarantee may not be the best way to do that. Universal basic income, compared against a jobs guarantee, seems to have a lot more solutions to the problems which are inherent with a jobs guarantee and with being able to survive at a baseline level. You want people to have the freedom to move to different jobs, to different occupations, to start new businesses, and also not potentially lose all sorts of income in the process. So if you can compare and contrast universal basic income versus a federal jobs guarantee, you have a winning argument. You're on solid ground. And I won't talk too much about federal jobs guarantee. I'll let Andrew Yang explain it and all the other candidates who will inevitably talk about it, because all the candidates are going to be attacking each other soon. That much is assured. We'll talk about that in a second. So universal basic income versus federal jobs guarantee. That's idea one. Idea number two is energy. And why energy? Because the Sanders camp and the Sanders supporters are very passionate about climate change, and they're very passionate about the environment. And so really the best energy argument that is around, and Scott Adams has talked about this, and he actually tweeted something positively about Andrew Yang. The best path forward for energy, it's the greenest form of energy, and it's a winning argument politically, would be fourth generation nuclear. Not old nuclear, so you can't go off and say that I'm a fan of nuclear energy. You don't want to say old nuclear. You don't want to say even just nuclear. You have to say fourth generation nuclear. These are the power plants that they don't explode, they don't melt down. If something catastrophic happens, they don't take out miles and miles around them. They don't carry nuclear fallout across the landscape. None of that happens with fourth generation nuclear. They fail safe. They don't have the same meltdown capabilities, and a lot of the nuclear reactors they use actually, and I'm just learning about this, they actually use nuclear waste that we already have as fuel. So it gets rid of nuclear waste. And so these new nuclear, fourth generation nuclear power plants is the winning ground for energy because it provides a cheap, at scale, form of energy that could be used for the entire country. It's a lot more greener, it's a lot more sustainable, and it's much better, much more greener than solar, wind power, oil, gas, natural gas. And I know there's some debate around what form of energy is the best, but I would argue that fourth generation nuclear is the best form of energy that we can go with going into the 21st century, the 22nd century, 23rd century and beyond. Nuclear is going to be a powerful source of energy, and we already know that Andrew Yang has some positive things to say about nuclear. This is why I'm bringing it up. I'm not necessarily advocating for nuclear. I'm just saying what the argument would be, because I know that Andrew Yang is in support of nuclear. At least he said some things to that effect. I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. But if he's a fan of nuclear, then you have to go with fourth generation nuclear, not just any nuclear. The reason is you don't want people to argue about nuclear energy. You want them to be arguing about fourth generation new nuclear versus old nuclear. That's the framing you want to have on it. You want the framing to be, how is this new stuff better than the old stuff? You don't want the framing to be, what is nuclear compared to all the other forms of energy? Even though if it goes that way, it's still winning ground. You're still going to win that debate. But fourth generation nuclear and energy, framing that as the greenest, the cleanest, and the best form of energy around, it's going to be rather convincing to not just Sanders supporters, but probably a whole bunch other more people. The third idea that he can attack Bernie Sanders on is healthcare. So we know Bernie Sanders is a fan of Medicare for all, and taken more broadly, universal healthcare. I'm going to suggest that that is a losing strategy, just because there's so much political baggage around Medicare for all or universal health care. There's a lot of baggage that comes with that, and people seem to be rather set with their opinions on those issues. It's something that's been debated in the public sphere. It's something that people already have opinions on. And what is it that you're really trying to go for with Medicare for all or universal health care? The idea is that you want everyone to have access to high quality health care, right? That's the idea behind universal health care. But in a sense, and Scott Adams was talking about this too, we already have universal health care. At least that's how I understand it. If you go to a hospital and you need some sort of medical intervention, the hospital can't say no. They have to do whatever it is that you need. The problem is the cost is so high. So the cost makes it so that we in practice or in reality don't have universal health care, because if you get anything done, then you have to pay for it, and you can't pay for it. So it's a very high barrier for people to get the care that they need, especially preventative care. So what the solution would be instead is what I would call healthcare 2.0. I would avoid the brand of Medicare for all, avoid universal health care, and instead I would call it healthcare 2.0. And you can come up with your own name, but that seems to be a sexy name to me. Healthcare 2.0, it's very innovative. And healthcare 2.0, the main thing there is that instead of focusing on universal versus not universal, whatever, you're focusing on bringing down the cost of healthcare to the point where it's practically free. It's almost free. So an operation or a procedure that would cost, let's say, $3,000, instead of that being a $3,000 operation, now it's a $30 intervention or a $30 procedure or even a $5 procedure, bringing down the cost so much that it's practically free. And the only way that you can do that is through innovation and through startups. Startups and innovation are going to be the key for making costs go down. And if you have a universal healthcare where no one has to pay and the government picks up the tab, you pretty much eliminate any real incentive for real innovation in the space, because it doesn't matter. People don't care what the cost is if they don't have to pay it. So why do you need to focus on bringing costs down? There's really no incentive. So there's no incentive to make new innovations in the healthcare space. But if people do have to pay, and you're opening up this arena, this market for innovation in healthcare and startups, if you're allowing for costs to be driven down by competition and by startups, now the cost is more important, and whoever has the lowest cost and also the highest quality, everything that you would evaluate a new startup on, whoever executes the best, and essentially, whoever can do that the best is going to win in the marketplace. So you're going to be spurring on a bunch of entrepreneurial and startup activity to drive these costs down. So Healthcare 2.0 is focusing on innovation in the healthcare space to make costs practically zero, because we already have the ability to cover everyone. We already have enough hospitals around the country, or enough primary care providers in most places, not everywhere. Rural places are a little bit tougher, and you need to expand access in those places. But even in rural areas, if you build a big hospital and it costs a lot, you're just going to have a closed hospital because no one can pay the cost. But if you bring the cost down, and instead of having maybe huge bureaucratic institutions that are hospitals that rely on very expensive procedures, if you have smaller, more localized hospitals or smaller, more localized practices that are offering lower cost types of procedures and solutions to medical issues, now we're looking like something that has a much higher quality of care, a much higher area of influence, and really a much better result for people who need healthcare, which is going to be all of us at some point. So focusing on bringing down the cost of healthcare would be I think a winning argument, and the branding on that would be Healthcare 2.0. And all of these three ideas, they require a little bit of persuasive engineering involved. So you can't just go out and say the ideas. Ideas are worth nothing unless you have good execution behind them. So I will leave it up to him and his campaign staff to figure out the best engineering for these ideas and for these policies. But if you're going to win the Democratic nomination, at some point you're going to have to attack someone. someone's going to attack you, you're going to have to respond. And you would much rather be in the position where you are framing the narrative, where you are picking the battlefield terrain that you want to fight on, instead of having that narrative or that frame forced upon you. You want to be able to decide where the conversation goes. You don't want to be on the back foot in responding to it. So that is my risky plan for how Andrew Yang can at least start to win the Democratic nomination process. He needs to attack someone, and I believe the most vulnerable person at this point, who would be the most, whose supporters would be the most open to coming into the fold, is probably Bernie Sanders. At some point you're going to have to attack him. I would attack him right now. We'll see. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know, but it's risky. I'll give you that. It's definitely risky. But the time when you want risk is when you have the least to lose and the most to gain. And so if you're stuck around the 3-4% polling area and you want to be around 20%, you're going to need to do something risky in order to get there. And we'll see what comes of it, but you're going to need to introduce some element of risk into your campaign at some point. You may as well do it earlier, so that way you can iterate and improve on your process and on your messaging, and you have more time to fix and improve whatever it is that you're attacking with, or fix your methods, whatever it is. You want to do it earlier is generally better. And we saw Trump attack pretty much right out of the starting gate. So that is my risky plan, but a plan that it's a plan that would work. If he does this, he's going to win that battle, and he'll be well on his way to establishing himself as the hero character in this play. All right, that is enough for today. Thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.